Listen-only mode.
I'm Laura Ferguson with the Kentucky Autism Training Center, and I'll be doing your webinar today on evidence-based practices for transitioning. And we're going to look at how to implement these strategies with individuals with autism. Feel free to ask questions or make comments at any point throughout the presentation by typing your question in the question box and clicking send. If you cannot see the question box, click on the orange box with a white arrow in the upper right corner of your screen to open the question box area. I will be answering all questions at the end of the presentation. All right, so we're going to get started, and we're going to, our goals for today are that we are going to understand how and why transitions may be difficult for individuals with autism. Then as we kind of understand that and look into why this may be a difficulty, we're then going to look at reinforcement strategies and then look into those evidence-based practices to help with transitioning. So with all of our presentations, I'm going to start just a few slides on what autism is and look at why this may be a difficulty when we're looking at those transitions for individuals with autism. So autism is a complex developmental disability that has a neurological basis that causes impairments in social interaction, communication, and we also see the presence of those unusual behaviors or interests. So when we're looking at the diagnosis and what we may see for individuals with autism, we're going to look at those deficit areas that we may see for the diagnosis. And the first one is those deficits in what we call social communication. And what we see there is that individuals with autism sometimes may have vocal ability or may not have the ability to communicate. But oftentimes when we see that communication with individuals with autism, they have issues with communicating socially. So they may be able to name things in their environment or talk about their favorite things, but the trouble often lies in that social communication. And so first we see that deficit in that social emotional reciprocity, meaning that back and forth conversation. So, you know, they may be able to label things that are right in front of them, like a computer, a keyboard, a pencil. But then when it gets into, hey, what did you do last night? What is your favorite thing to do on the playground? Those questions tend to be difficult because they are more open-ended. And so that back and forth conversation often is difficult for individuals on the spectrum. The next thing we may see is those deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors. And so they may have trouble picking up on those nonverbal cues by individuals when they're communicating that back and forth. And that's very, very important with reading those cues from individuals when starting and stopping our conversation or knowing that those statements may be appropriate or non-appropriate. We also see that they have deficits in developing and maintaining relationships. And if you think about it, if they have trouble with that social emotional reciprocity, that back and forth, and they have trouble picking up on nonverbal cues, we see that they may have trouble in developing and maintaining those relationships with their peers and adults as well. The next thing we see with autism is that we see that they have may have some restricted or repetitive patterns of behaviors. And what we see under there is they may have, in order to get the diagnosis, they at least have to have two of the following. And the first one we see is that stereotyped or repetitive motor movements we may see. So that's where we may see some of that rocking or hand flapping, where we may see that they use objects or speech repetitively. Then we also may see that they may have some insistence on sameness. And so as we're talking through today, this is where we're going to talk through how we may see those patterns of behaviors and that inflexibility with routines and changes. This is what a lot of what we're going to focus on today is that individuals with autism have trouble with that flexibility because schedules become very, very important. You know, because as you can think about us, we knew to be here at this webinar or to conduct this webinar because it was on our planner or computer or our phone. If there was a change, we could ask others what was going on. But for individuals with autism, when they know their schedule, they know their routine, and something comes up, and changes that unexpectedly, they may not have the vocal ability to kind of understand, okay, why did this change? What can I do differently? And so that schedule becomes very, very important, so they depend upon that schedule and routine. We also may see under uh, the restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, those deficits, is that they may have a highly restricted interest or fixated interest that have a high or intensity and focus. So we may see that they have they like one item or activity, and they talk about that all the time, or spend an absorbent amount of time on that one item or activity. And the last one we may see under this restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior is that hyposensitivity to sensory input, or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. So that this is where we may see that they prefer crunchy versus soft foods, or we see that, the tags in their shirts may drive them crazy, or they seek out deep pressure inappropriately by getting under couch cushions, or going up and squeezing individuals, or running into items. So we may see that they have a hypo or hyper reactivity to that sensory things in their environment. So I wanted to take that quick look about autism, because I want to remember what we're talking about transitions with. We're going to look at these evidence-based practices that have been proven to be effective for individuals with autism, as we're talking about how to kind of transition from those items and activities in their daily routines. And so thinking about individuals with autism and why transitions may be difficult, the one things that we see is that transitions that come up and can be unpredictable. So for individuals with autism who want that routine and want that to know what's going to happen next, to understand where they're going to go or where they're going to transition to, that unpredictability of transitions can be a high anxiety for them. So you say we're going to the gym today because there's going to be an assembly. Well, what is that going to be? I don't know what an assembly is. It's usually not on my schedule. You say that, Mom or Dad, you're going to take me to, McDonald's, but we're not going to go to McDonald's. We're going to go to this restaurant. But I'm going to like it, but I don't know what to expect. So transitions can be difficult in the aspect that they can be unpredictable. They don't know exactly what's going to happen. Also, if we're looking at transitions of where we see individuals with autism sometimes have difficulty in the home, in the school, in clinical settings, in every environment, is transitioning from that preferred item away from that preferred item to a non-preferred. So in a school system, it may be they're on the computer and they don't want to get off the computer. So you say it's time to get off, and they may exhibit some inappropriate behaviors, and it may be that that child doesn't know when reinforcement is returning. I'm on the computer, you're telling me to get off, I really want to stay here, I don't understand when it will come back. So transitions may be difficult in that I don't know when I'm returning to my favorite routine, my favorite activity. Also, we may not be clear in what's going to happen. With the individuals with autism, oftentimes they report to us, or we see within their routines and their daily lives, that they want specifics. They want to know what exactly is happening and when it's happening and what it'll entail, what's going to be there. And so if we're not specific in what we're doing and where we're going and who we may see, those transitions may be difficult because they're not clear on what's going to happen or the level of expectation. And also looking at this, transitions may be difficult because they may have difficulty requesting more details. So if you are with your child and you're supposed to go to McDonald's, but say McDonald's had to close early, so you ended up going here. Well, for an individual with autism who doesn't have a lot of language, they might not be able to request more details. So transitions become difficult because I know you told me that, we're not going to McDonald's, but I really want to know where we're going and what's going to happen. But I don't have the ability to kind of request more details from you. So that transition then becomes difficult as well. So now that we kind of understand, and we probably see it in our daily lives working with individuals with autism, that transitions can be a huge issue. And we think about how many transitions that individuals go through on a daily basis, whether it's home, school, work environment. There's tons of transitions that happen. So it's imperative excuse me, that we think about how we can make transitions more smooth for individuals on the autism spectrum. So let's take a look at some strategies that are effective for individuals on the spectrum. So I do want to point out that everything that we're going to talk about today are evidence-based strategies. And the reason that we're talking about evidence-based is we want to make sure that we're using the sharpest tools at our disposal. We're looking at those tools that have proven to be effective through research, that they are effective on how to help individuals with autism transition, help individuals with autism communicate needs and wants. We want to make sure we're using our sharpest tools in our kind of bucket. So that's why we're going to be focusing on those evidence-based practices. So I do want to point you to two websites that are very informative and have helped me when I'm researching what is the latest research on those strategies. And the first one is that evidence-based practices briefs that's on the UNC EDU website. It has a list of all the evidence-based practices and how to implement those, and that's available at that long website there, the first one listed. And the next one is Autism Internet Modules, and those are modules that have videos about those specific evidence-based practices and how to use them both in the home, the school setting. So there's different environments and how to implement those. So I did want to point those out before we kind of get into those strategies. But we are going to be talking about those strategies that have proven to be evidence-based when looking at transitions. So the first thing I want to get into when we're looking at strategies is that it's very imperative that we think about for individuals with autism. You know, I don't want to use the term that individuals with autism are visual learners because we can't say that, but we do see that a lot of individuals report back to us that I don't get it when you tell it to me, but when you show it to me, I absolutely understand what's expected. So one of the first things that we're going to look at when thinking about how we can make transitions effective for individuals with autism is thinking about those visual supports. And visual supports are what we use in our daily lives. And we kind of take them for granted because we're like, I don't need a visual support for that. But when we think about it, what we use in our phone, you know, our Google Maps, our you know, signs on the side of the road that lead us to the right building. We use visual supports constantly. So if we have individuals who report to us that visual supports are effective, it's imperative that we think about using those for transitions throughout their day. So I listed here some just different types of visual supports. We can use objects, scripts, timelines, schedules, written words, labels, you know, sometimes we see organizational systems, and environmental arrangements. Those are all places and ways that we can use visual supports. And the reason, you know, if we think back to what we had just said earlier, you know, that unpredictability of schedules, of routines, of where they're going to go is maybe a reason that they have trouble transitioning from, you know, preferred to non-preferred or transitioning throughout their day. So if we're thinking about why visual supports are important, it makes life more predictable. And it gives us a framework for talking about change. You know, we would like to say that, you know, this is Tuesday, our day's going to go exactly how we think it will, but that never occurs, right? So there are going to be things that come up. But when we make life more predictable using routines and visual supports, then we can move in ways to kind of talk about change. So when we make the life more predictable using those visual support strategies, we can then provide a framework of how we're going to talk to them about, yeah, we were going to do this, but change is going to happen here. It also is an easy way to provide students with consistent cues for their daily lives, and students or children, depending upon, you know, who you're working with and where you're working with them. And it helps them anticipate what's going to happen next. You know, we all like some predictability in our day. You know, like I know that I'm going to go to lunch today. I don't know the time, but I would like to know that it is going to happen. So it kind of helps the child anticipate what will happen next in their day. So one of the visual strategies, and I have a lot of examples, but I want to talk through is scheduling. And, we think about scheduling in school systems, but we don't think about how we can use that in our daily lives outside of schools as well. But one way we can help with transitions with individuals with autism is to think about how we can use schedules. And one of the things with schedules is there's steps to implementing them. We can't just say, hey, buddy, here's what you're going to do all day. I wrote a list of what's going to help you throughout the day. But we have to make sure that we understand how to introduce a schedule to a child with autism. And the first thing we have to do is model the act of checking the schedule. So whether it's a written schedule that just has things that's going to happen throughout the day, whether it's something we just kind of pull pictures off to understand how and what's going to occur, or if we're just going to have them um, erase something on a dry erase board when it's finished, we have to model for them how a schedule can be effective and what it looks like and how it can help us make the day more predictable. So the first thing is we want to remember to model it. How would we do it? Show them how to do it. And remember, model the steps exactly how you want the child to do it. So if you're in the home setting and your child has difficulty after school, coming in, they're constantly asking when dinner's going to be or when I can play iPad, thinking about, maybe it'd be effective if I kind of wrote a list of the things that will make life more predictable for him. So I'm going to write it on a dry erase board. It's the easiest thing for us. Or I'm going to, put some magnetic pictures on our fridge. Well, you want to model for them how they can then go up and, take that first picture off and be like, I'm done cleaning my room. What am I going to do next? And you want to model it exactly how you want the child to do it so that they understand that technique. You also want to limit those verbal directions when you're modeling it. So, like, for example, you don't want to be like, you know what you're going to do, go get that next thing. Hey, remember to mark that off. Because what you want to do is you want to be sure that they will use this schedule, this list, however you're going to make it available. You want to make sure that they are going to use this when you're not there. So if you're constantly talking to them and using verbal directions, then you're making it more difficult to fade yourself away. So remember to kind of just model it for them and then guide them through it, but limit those directions so that they'll use it when you're not there. The second step is to kind of guide them through the schedule. Prompt them as needed through the steps, so if you walk up or if you have a dry erase board and they finish the first thing on the list, prompt them to erase the next thing or mark it out, and then prompt them to hold the dry erase marker by the next step and have them understand what they do then. Or if they're taking a picture off the fridge or in the classroom, you prompt them through the first step and then back away and see if they could do the next one, and kind of look at how you can prompt them to use the schedule, but then fade yourself out as needed. And again, you want to make sure that you're limiting those verbal directions in this steps too. You don't want your child or student or a client to be dependent upon those verbal prompts, because those are the hardest prompts to fade. You constantly saying, go to the next thing, check that out. What are we going to do next? Where are we going to go? Again, if you're sitting there talking them through this the entire time, it's going to be difficult to then fade out those prompts. So you want to make sure that when you're doing step 2 and kind of moving them through the process, you want to ensure success. So you want to use a prompt level that will ensure that they get it correct. So whether it's hand over hand prompting, whether it's pointing or gesturing to the next activity, you want to ensure success. If you just give it to them and say, here's your schedule for the night, this is what you are expected to do, or your schedule for the day, and they don't know how to navigate it and don't understand what to do next, it's not going to be effective. It's not going to be something that they use consistently. So make sure you're using a prompt to ensure success so they understand then how to do it when you're not there. And then you want to reinforce. You want to make sure that the student or child knows that a schedule is a good thing, and that will kind of help predictability in their night, in their day, in their work area, wherever you're working with those individuals. So that ensures, if you think back to the slide on why transitions are difficult, it limits that unpredictability. It's now becoming more predictable for them. They understand what they can do next. They understand on the schedule maybe when reinforcement's coming. So it kind of limits those things that make transitions difficult. So schedules become very, very important to help them understand and make predictability throughout their night, their day, their work area, wherever you're working with individuals at. The third step is step back and allow the student or child to do the schedule independently. Be there to support them if needed, ensure success, and remember to reinforce. Reinforce the schedule, reinforce them using the schedule so that they understand this is a good thing for them. So in the next 5 or 6 slides, I believe, we're going to look at some schedules and how those can be effective in the home environment, in the school environment, and how they can help with transitions. So this first little schedule is a student, obviously, that they used in the classroom to kind of understand when he was going to access his next reinforcer. Excuse me. I was losing my voice there for a moment. But what they wanted to do is they wanted him to understand where he could go to look for what was happening next. So what they did is put a picture beside his name. And at this point, the individual could not recognize his name. So what they did was they had him match picture to picture. So he would go up, they would hand him his picture, and then he would know when it was time to kind of go look at your schedule. So he would go put his picture in the picture slot, then go and look at the next thing, which was work, and then it would have play. And so that kind of led to the predictability of knowing, okay, I'm going to know what's happening next. I'm going to know what's expected of me because I know to find that pink outline on the table, and that's what I do next. So the color coding kind of led him to the table or activity to know what he was supposed to do. So the prompt on when to check your schedule was the picture card was handed to him, not a lot of vocals there. He went and matched it to it, then would go up and pull off the next activity. So again, with those transitions, it made transitions predictable. He did then know when reinforcement was coming because I now know I get to play right after I complete the first step. The next one is another example of how schedules can be effective and how they can be portable. You can use part day schedules. This can be stored anywhere for individuals, easy to use and navigate, if they're in the home environment or if they're in the work environment. It can be stored, in their backpack, in their work satchel, wherever they need it. But what you see up here is you see that what are they doing now? So right now we're at the grocery store, and then when they're finished, they would slide that into the finish slot, which is also shown down at the bottom. Then what they're going to do next is on the slot, and so that would move up to the now. When that's finished, it moved into that slot, and then we'll get hamburger. And then inside was the different things that were available for that day. So that was very portable. Consistency was used. It can make predictability in the environment, let them know when dinner's coming instead of not understanding what's going to come next in my schedule and what to expect. The next one was something that using the child's interest, which is always good. It was a slide and follow schedule. So what they would do is the dog indicated what was the next activity. And when the dog got into the doghouse, then they knew that that was then their free period. And then we see another one over on the right that was a helicopter. And when it got to the landing pad, then they can choose what they're going to do. So this was a cool way. They used this in home and school to kind of teach the child what the expectation was, and the child's interest was dogs and animals. So they used the interest within the schedule. And then this student over here, the interest was an airplane. And so he loved dealing with airplanes. And so they put his interest within the schedule so he can understand what to do, where to go next, and get that predictability within their home environment and school environment. The next schedule is a good option for individuals who are older, who Sometimes we work with individuals who are in school work environments, and they don't want to carry, the folder schedule around. They sometimes indicate, I don't want to look different and have those pictures. Well, for this individual, this was a schedule we used in the school environment. They also used it at home to indicate what he should do in the evening as well to kind of finish his day. But every kid in the school carried around a binder, and a binder is appropriate in the community as well if he's going to transition to a work environment. So this was a way to kind of teach them what was going to happen next and the predictability of what to expect. And it was in his binder, so he didn't have to carry an extra schedule around. This is also can be a routine or activity schedule, so you can break it down. So you don't want the schedule to be so overwhelming. And if the child or student wants breakfast, but it's 16 things down the list, that may be very, very difficult for them. So you may want to break it down to a morning and afternoon schedule, whether it's work and home, whether it's when they're in school and then they're home, or looking at that. So thinking about the needs of the student and seeing what's overwhelming to them. Should I make a schedule with every possible thing on it, or will that be too overwhelming for this particular child? And schedules don't have to be that intricate. They can be something as simple as written schedules. If you have individuals who have difficulty in the classroom or at home, if you just put homework on a board and they're like, I know it says homework, but I don't know what to do there. Or if you're working with an adult in a work environment and it just says, go to this area. Well, then they might need to know exactly what to do within that area. So you may have a simple schedule, or you may have an activity schedule. Like, I know I go to language arts here, but what do I have to do in language arts? I have to unpack, and then once I do that, I can check it off. And then I have to do my worksheet, and then I check it off. And then my next worksheet, I check it off, group work, check it off. And then the last thing indicates to them what they can do when they're finished with all of that. So that moving that reinforcement into their schedule, knowing what's going to happen next, and it's very, very imperative that we think about using those reinforcement strategies as well. This is a within activity schedule also, to kind of understand, that predictability of the steps of a routine, such as brushing teeth. So, we may tell a child or student, go brush your teeth, but they may not understand those steps and routines. So thinking about how we can use those within activity schedules to teach those individual steps. And here are two more examples of that. What does washing hands look like? What does brushing my teeth look like? And how do I know when I'm finished with that? Another visual support that is not exactly a schedule but can be very effective are transition cards. So if you don't have an individual who uses a specific schedule or routine, but giving them transition cards to know where they need to go next in the home, in the school, in the work. If you don't have the ability to kind of schedule out the day, which I recommend, transition cards can be effective as well to kind of give predictability throughout the day. We had an individual who was an adult who worked in a facility, and those transition cards were used because of the unpredictability of the day sometimes, and they would just give him, the library card, and that's where he had to go work next. So when schedules are not available for home settings or for work environments or school settings, transitions cards can be effective too, to kind of be a visual support of there's some predictability. I'm going to tell you to walk down the hall, but where you're going is the library. So there's no question of where I go next because I have this card that indicates to me my expectation and where I'm supposed to go. Another type of visual support that is highly, highly effective is thinking about a first then board. So if you have adults, this can be developed and used for any age range. But a first then board, if we think back again to how transitions from preferred to non-preferred transitions for unpredictability, they can be very, very make our students very anxious because they don't understand what's going to happen next or the level of expectation. And a first then board um, is a visual form that provides high motivation for a student or child to work through one activity to get to a preferred activity. It's a very, very powerful tool because it teaches them what is going to come next. And that next thing is always going to be that reinforcer. So it's imperative that oftentimes when I'm in home settings and have recommended this strategy, or in school settings or work settings, they'll tell me, oh, we tried that, but it wasn't effective. And it's imperative that we think about the steps to teaching it. And what you do is you identify preferred items through preference assessments or reinforcement surveys or observing the child in the environment, and seeing what is that thing that they really, really love. So is it iPad? Is it Minecraft? Is it, Reese's Cups? Is it, payment, at a work site? What is those things that are reinforcing to the individual? So the first thing you do is you then put a preferred to a preferred. So the first picture would be the preferred item, and the second picture would be the preferred item. So what you are doing there is you're teaching this child, student, individual in your work site that these are going to be two things you love, so why not use this board? If we hand it to an individual at a work site and say, um, clean all these items and then you'll get, a hamburger. And they're like, I don't like this board because it shows me those things that I'm really not interested in yet. But if we teach them that it's a preferred to a preferred first, then they really, really want that board. That board shows them two things that they love. So you do a preferred to preferred, and then several opportunities over several days, you kind of gradually introduce some non-preferred tasks. So you may go from a kind of preferred, but the second item under the then is an always a preferred item. And then as they get used to the board and have used it over opportunities over several days, then you can go to a non-preferred to a preferred. So say, for example, the last thing they have to do is sweep the floor before they can go outside, or they have to clean up before they can go outside, or they have to finish this activity before they can go outside. Then you have taught them that then is always going to be a reinforcer. And I have shown you that I'm always going to allow you to contact reinforcement. So the first then process teaches them of when reinforcement is going to happen. And it is crucial that it is introduced to the students and childs as previously discussed. Because initially the board will have no meaning at all, and it has to be learned or taught. And you want the student or child to like the first then board. It means good things are on the way. So if we just give it to them and say, clean up, then we go outside, then, we don't know if they understand that, oh, do I see clean up and throw this board on the floor? Because that's the one thing I don't want to do. And we want to make sure moving away from that first being highly preferred too quickly may result in the board becoming that adversive. I don't want this board because it shows me those things I don't want to do. So make sure that you start with that preferred to preferred items to teach them that this is a board that shows these items that I'm engaged in and want to do. So I want to use this board for predictability. So let's take a look at some sample first then boards. They can be really, really simple. This is a first then board. They used actual pictures with words. Depending upon the skill level of your child, student, individual in your work site, client, you can simply make a clear piece of paper, write first and then with a marker, and laminate it and put two Velcro pictures on it. This is one that was made that we kind of used in a classroom. First you tidy up, then you go outside. This student was understood kind of those picture representations, so we used those pictures because that's what they understood. This is a board that I often use with parents and schools on teaching first then. they like the color coordination. It doesn't have to be red and green, but it teaches them, what's going to happen first. And for students who are available, who can read written words, you can laminate that paper, write with a dry erase marker what is first, and then write on what is going to happen next. Now remember, you want that predictability, you want it to be that reinforcer. So think about that then being a reinforcing activity. Sometimes if we sit down with our child to do homework, or we're working with them in the classroom, and we say, hey buddy, if we finish this work, we can get those Reese's cups. We say it and we say it and we say it, but when we pull that out and use the board, and it's always led to reinforcement, that becomes like a promissory. I know that that's going to occur, so I am going to engage in the first behavior in order to contact a reinforcer. And one of the things that we often see, and I often talk to individuals about with transitions, is sometimes we often say, okay, I have this child who I can't get off the iPad. I can't get them to move away from the computer. And sometimes individuals, like we said before, may not know when reinforcement is going to come back. I just know that when you take me off the computer, I don't know when I'm going to have it again. I don't know when it's going to come back. And one of the things that we do oftentimes in homes and in schools is some compliance training to understand the contingencies that you do this, you contact a reinforcer. So within that, transitions from preferred to non-preferred items or activities can be difficult for our individuals on the autism spectrum. So we have to think about, how can our physical structure of our classroom or our home setting help to facilitate those transitions? So, understanding where to go when transitions are going to take place, that predictability can be very effective. So, classrooms have placed feet on the floor to know where to line up. Work areas have taught individuals where to stand using visual supports on the floor to kind of know where they need to be in order to do this or that. Teaching when and how they can access reinforcers is highly, highly effective. And using tape to indicate designated areas, and I just said this, but where to sit or where to stay on those boundaries or those areas where they need to be. So when we're thinking about kind of how we can make that predictable and using compliance training, one of the things that we can think about is, when a student or child is engaged with preferred reinforcers, it becomes difficult to think about transitioning them to other activities or demands. So we may need to teach them that reinforcement's going away, but will come back quickly. It's like when you have a individual you're working with, and you remove a toy and they start screaming. That unpredictability of, I think it may be gone forever, so I need to know when it's coming back. So I want to share with you something that we did in a school system and kind of transitioned it over to a home on how we kind of increase compliance with an individual transitioning from a preferred to a non-preferred. So let's look at that sample plan. So what we did is, this student was in a room and did not want to leave the iPad. So what we wanted to do was teach them some compliance training, that iPad will come back, but I want it to be contingent upon the behavior that you're engaging in. So first you have to follow a demand, and then you'll get the computer back. So what we did is, we placed the child in an area where demands and reinforcement can take place. So we didn't want it to become a big issue of, I then have to transition you all the way over here to do demands and then bring you back, because the student would then fall to the floor, engage in behaviors, engage in aggression. So then we're dealing with a lot of behaviors at once. So what we did is, we placed the child in a location where reinforcement and demands could occur in the same area, the same place. So when he was engaged in reinforcement, the teacher will approach with an item they can quickly cover or move the reinforcer. And so what we did with the student was, instead of going through, the student would love YouTube videos. And so instead of having him X out of the YouTube video and then move over to do work, what we did is, we would go over, we'd place a manila folder over laptop, and then we would place an easy demand. And our first demand was put the pencil in the cup. And this was something that this student had demonstrated. It was already in his repertoire. So we knew that this was an easy demand for them. So what he did is he, when the manila folder went over it, we heard some resistance, so immediately we had the items to ask him, put the pencil in the cup. He put the pencil in the cup, we removed the manila folder and said, excellent work, and he got to play with YouTube again. So what we did is we went back and did that several opportunities. And after about 3 opportunities, we saw that the child decreased the screaming. He was understanding, oh, I just need to do this simple demand, and then I contact a reinforcer. So what we did was we did that. So then after we saw behaviors, we saw the inappropriate behaviors decrease, then we would put the manila folder over there over the computer, and then we would increase the demand. So then it was put the pencil in the cup, write the letter A, and then we would take the manila folder off and say excellent work, and then have him contact a reinforcer. We wanted that to be a quick process because we wanted to teach him that reinforcement was contingent upon him complying with a demand. So we wanted to use behavior-specific praise as well. Like, I love the way you put the pencil in the cup. I love that you gave me the pencil, or whatever the activity was. So we continued with that for several trials. If he was successful for those 5 trials, we increased the demands to 2 demands. And we still made sure that those demands were within the student's repertoire. And that means we weren't going to tell the student, do this trigonometry problem, find the area of a rectangle, because that wasn't in his ability. So we wanted to make the demands simple so that reinforcement could come back quickly. And then we gradually increased the number of demands placed. So what we were teaching the student was that reinforcement is going to come, but it's contingent upon you engaging in the demands that we've asked you to do. A lot of our students or children at home think, okay, turn off the computer. They may engage in falling to the floor, screaming, because they don't know that it will come back. I don't know when I'm going to get it back. So teaching them that, quick demands, then I'll gradually fade in more demands, but you're still going to contact that reinforcer, teaches them to understand that it's contingent upon following through with the demands, but I will get my reinforcer back. Then what we gradually did with this student was we pushed a table closer to him. And so then we would turn his chair, and the demands were placed at a table. And then he could turn his chair back over and get back the computer. And then we moved the table further and further away, so he had to pull his chair over to then move away from that. The work environment always had to be right there with a reinforcer. So then he started to move towards the class gradually and know that he could then go back and get reinforcement. It was a successful process. We got up to 16 demands within that one day of implementing this. And then after we got into a large amount of demands, we started to add in things that weren't in the student's repertoire. Now, we didn't pull out, let's do 50 math problems yet, but we maybe, let's do these 2, do these 3, and then they could contact a reinforcer. But a lot of times we don't make it clear that kids are going to contact reinforcement contingent upon their behavior. Sometimes we put reinforcement will happen after 3rd period or at the end of the day, and we need to show them contingent upon following demands, I'll contact a reinforcer, so that then teaches them that reinforcement will come back. I just have to comply and complete what is expected of me by this adult or peer. So some things to remember if you're going to try to implement this compliance training, these contingencies, is that you want to remember that reinforcement, the reinforcer you use should be highly reinforcing. You don't want to pull out a sticker and be like, if you pick up the pencil, here you get a sticker, and the kid kind of throws the sticker away. You want to make sure you're using that reinforcer that's highly reinforcing to them. What's that thing that they love that is indicated through preference assessments or reinforcement surveys to be the most effective reinforcer? You want to make sure at first when you're teaching this that you're making sure the demand is a mastered skill, that it's something in the child's repertoire. Because if you put the manila folder over the laptop, for example, in that plan that we did, and then you say, hey, finish this reading comprehension worksheet, we're not teaching them that reinforcement will come quickly. We got to gradually fade that in. We want to make sure, you also want to make sure to have materials ready. You don't want to have to go across the room to get the materials to then bring over. Make sure it's within your reach so you can place the demands quickly to know that reinforcement comes quickly, so that you're making sure they contact reinforcement and they understand, I completed that demand, I get reinforcement. And always remember, don't increase those number of demands too quickly. This will make that reinforcer less motivating. So I know this sounds like a long process, but once you get into it, you can really reinforce and move in more difficult demands or things that aren't in the repertoire at a really high rate when you start to teach students contingencies, and to understand that I do this, I get this, and I know reinforcement's going to come because I've been taught that. And so it makes transitions from preferred to non-preferred more predictable for those students and children. We also ran this compliance at home. It made it effective in the home as well to get him off the iPad. We did some similar things. We instead of a pencil by the computer, we would have some socks on the floor. Pick up your socks. That was something we knew the individual could do. Moved into more. Taught them the contingencies at home, and that reinforcement would come back as well. A very effective tool to kind of teach that transition from preferred to non-preferred. So as I was talking about before, enhancing those transitions, kind of laying out specifically where transitions may take place or where I need to go can be a great tool as well. If they're on the computer, knowing exactly where to sit, where their boundaries are by tape or, a line, or, knowing that I'm red, so I always know to go line up on red. I know that I'm red at work. I stand on the red spot at work, so I know where exactly I'm supposed to be to kind of eliminate that unpredictability of transitions. This was also something we used in a school as well. We also started to use this in the home and a work environment. When individuals may take a break in the work environment, or they may take a break at school, and we say, okay, you have 5 more minutes, or it's a 5 countdown. If we had an area that wasn't using a visual timer, this was a way to kind of count it down. So they would start with 5. The teacher in this environment, because this was done at a school, would go and remove the 5, and then say, okay, we have 4 more times, 4 more minutes. And we know that we don't have the ability always to go back in the minute, but this was a visual tool to kind of get that representation that there was a countdown happening. And then when you got to 1, your next thing was listed. So it was a countdown to the next activity, which was highly effective to kind of let them know that we're transitioning away from that preferred activity into another activity. So again, a great visual support to help. This was also something, and we used this for a student who, obviously, if you think about it, there was restricted interest, was Mr. Potato Head. And this was something we got offline that we used for an individual. And what we did was we folded it at the dotted line, as you can see. And so we would do a countdown of you have 5, you have 4, you have 3, you have 2, and we would flip it up as they had it left, and then 1, and then we were all done with that item or activity, and then we're going to the next one. So a visual support to kind of let them know when items were going to go away and we're going to go to a different activity. So we used their interest. So they loved, oh, 5 potato heads. I have 5 potato heads left. Oh, I have 4, and letting them understand that the countdown, it was getting closer to moving from those preferred to non-preferred activities. Also, communicating no or something that is not available. So, if you have children or students who have difficulty moving away from item or activities or interest, making sure you're using those visual supports to indicate when things aren't available. I know you want a computer, but I'm going to teach you that when there's a hand on it, it's not available at that time. Or when there's a no sign or a stop sign, we know that those are not available to access right now. So teaching that skill can be highly effective as well. Also, for transitions, I'm a big proponent of teaching timers and using timers. One of my favorite is in the middle at the bottom. It's a time timer. They have them now as apps on phones and iPads, but it's a visual timer that counts down. You can push it to red for, say, 5 minutes, and then as the red goes away, time is getting eliminated. And then it also has an auditory component that dings when time is up. So it teaches kids to understand that, yes, I have this, but I have it for this amount of time, and when it goes away, I know that I then have to make the transition. So again, kind of prepping them for those transitions and understanding that they may happen. This was an area in a classroom that we used that showed what the behavior expectations, and then they had the small time timers by the computer. The only thing that would happen, is you may can guess, is that kids would then push the timer to 20 minutes, 45 minutes. So what we had to end up doing is we used a piece of Velcro to Velcro these above the computers on the wall, and the teacher would move the time to 5 minutes, so it would ding, so the student couldn't then push it to 45 or 55 minutes. But a great kind of tool to show you how it can be used in the classroom. So when we're thinking about it, and with these transitions, there's a change that's going to occur. So how do we prepare for that change, letting them know new things are coming up, what's going to happen? So some of the things that we want to think about is manipulating that environment. If I always transition from my fun little area that has everything I love, and I'm going to this table that I know instruction's going to happen, and it's going to be less fun. Think about, is that table area aversive? Maybe we need to have fun things happen at that table. If you have a child at home who you always go to dinner and then you're fighting over what they eat. Maybe we play with Play-Doh at the dinner table, not at dinner time, but, at other times, so that fun things also happen at the table. Not every fun thing happens away from that table. So make the table a reinforcing environment as well. Priming is a big proponent as well. And that's when you're preparing the student or child for that transition. This is when we say on the playground, hey, we have 5 more minutes, preparing them for things that are going to come next. Hey, guys, we're reading a book, at nighttime, but after the book, we're going to go to bed. Priming them, letting them know that things are going to come up, things are going to change in a little bit. But make sure, throughout that time, you're offering that choice. We're going to transition here. Would you like to go down this hallway or this hallway? We're going to go to the bathroom. You want to use this one over here or that one? Sometimes when we're when we're talking about transitions, when we're prepping them for them, maybe we can give them some choice in the what's going to come, the change that's going to happen. How can I make that a little bit more reinforcing by giving you some opportunities to make some choices there? What's going to happen? We're going to have a change. I'm going to let you select the reinforcer. I'm going to let you select the materials, the order of a task, the partners or peers you work with, the location. We can work in, if transitions from preferred to non-preferred are always difficult, how can we offer choice in that to make it a less aversive transition, in giving them that choice? Avoid sudden changes if possible. So Sometimes teachers, parents use a change card. Hey, we were going to McDonald's, but I got a change, and so they always use a color card or a specific card or a star on a card to indicate, oh, we're doing something special, it's something different, so that when that unpredictability happens, they start to learn, if I got this change card, I know I might not know what's going to happen, but it indicates a change in my schedule. So it gets them used to understanding those changes are going to occur. So maybe thinking about a change card or a different card or another choice card, something that indicates to them that something's going to happen that's going to be unpredictable, but I know it's going to occur because I have this change card that somebody gave me. So I know that unpredictability may be occurring pretty soon. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is, remember that reinforcement is key. I've kind of talked about this all throughout the presentation, but reinforcement is the key in changing a lot of behaviors, all behaviors really. We want to reinforce those behaviors we want to see. So if we have trouble with individuals with autism transitioning, make sure that we're using positive reinforcement. We're reinforcing those behaviors that we want to see and not just trying to eliminate the behaviors we don't want to see. So if we have those successful transitions, if we have them transition from computer to the table without tantruming one time, that we're using behavior-specific praise to say, I love the way you came to the table without screaming. We're using those positive reinforcers to teach them the behaviors we want to see. So think about throughout the time, am I using reinforcement to increase strategies for transitions for my students or child or individuals in my workplace that I'm working with on the autism spectrum? So remember, when we're using reinforcement, that use preferences to reinforce appropriate transitions. Make sure that they have indicated that that's a reinforcer, that they're motivated by the item or activity. Allow the child to make choices if possible. Make reinforcement contingent upon appropriate transition behavior, so you can make those contingencies clear to the students or the child. And reinforcement procedures strengthen behaviors. So make sure, again, that reinforcements are doing that. They should change behavior. So if you have an effective reinforcer, it's going to change that behavior. So make sure you're using those reinforcers that students and children have indicated to you that are reinforcers. All right, so I wanted to add a reference page, so there's just some references of things, but I wanted to open it up for questions. So we have about 3 minutes, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now. And I will open it up for any questions. If you don't have any questions, I do want to say that my email address is on the slide, so you're free to email me after the training as well if you don't want to ask your question in this forum. Okay. A quick question about pacing. What are some strategies to avoid an individual with autism rushing through a non-preferred activity? Great question. What I usually do with the rushing procedure is sometimes I adapt the task as, for example, if I have a worksheet to give a student, sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, we're going to do the first 3. And so we go through the first 3, we kind of check it, then I introduce the next ones. So we go through the paper as a kind of, we're going to do first, second, last to teach them to not rush. So sometimes I introduce materials, worksheets, comprehension pages, whatever it is, at short spans to teach them that we can't just do 1 through 10 and get that. And so we go through the first ones and look through them and check them. Then we go, okay, excellent job. Now we're going to go to the next couple. So I sometimes adapt it down to, we're going to finish it, check it, finish it, check it, to teach them that it's more effective to get through the paper and do it effectively instead of kind of rushing through the material. I hope that makes sense. Okay, it looks like there's no more questions at this time. Again, if you do have a question and you haven't typed it out yet, or you don't want to ask it in this forum, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have if I can help. But thank you again for coming to the presentation. I hope it was helpful and gave you some strategies that are effective. But thank you for coming, and hope we'll see you at another webinar. Thank you.